It's the most emotional experience that a person can go through to know that what they're working on is something that has reached a generation of people.
Oh my God.
You know a movie is in trouble when it becomes the punchline of a Simpsons gag before audiences have even finished arguing about whether they want to buy a ticket. In the span of 2 short years, Disney's live-action Snow White remake morphed from surefire holiday hit to Snowwoke, the reimagining, complete with an empty Springfield theater and a weeping cartoon, Rachel Zegler. That savage 3-second clip is only the latest twist in a behind-the-scenes fairy tale gone spectacularly off the rails, a cautionary tale about fandom, corporate optics, and
I would highly advise that you boycott this film, no matter how much your children love Snow White.
the speed at which a beloved brand can curdle in the social media spotlight. But before we trace the wreckage, let's hit rewind. Rewind to December 2021. Steven Spielberg's glossy new take on West Side Story has just opened, and the industry press cannot stop talking about the unknown 19-year-old who stepped into Natalie Wood's shoes and somehow made the role of María feel brand new. Rachel Zegler.
They're remaking the movie. They just got rid of the dwarfs.
Okay, but what do they call them?
Colombian-Polish, YouTube discovered, golden-voiced, was instantly labeled Hollywood's next big thing. She won a Golden Globe, signed with a powerhouse agency, walked every red carpet with the wide-eyed enthusiasm of someone who still kept her high school drama medals in a desk drawer. By early 2022, Disney had scooped her up to headline the studio's splashiest remake yet, Snow White. At first, the casting sounded like the kind of progressive win Disney loves to frame in shareholder slides. The first Latina Snow White, front and center of a reimagining that could speak to a new generation. Twitter cheered, think pieces bloomed, and Zegler recorded a giddy reaction video in her childhood bedroom. All systems go. Then the press junket started. In one of her very first interviews, Zegler, perhaps assuming Disney wanted a bold modern spin, described Prince Florian, he of the 1937 cartoon, as basically a stalker, called the original love story weird, and promised the remake would not be about a girl waiting for true love, but about a leader who knows her own power. Those comments were clipped, captioned, memeified, and forwarded at the speed of outrage to every corner of YouTube and TikTok. Overnight, Snow White stopped being a nostalgia project and started looking like a culture war grenade. The timing could not have been worse. Only days earlier, Peter Dinklage had blasted Disney on Mark Maron's podcast for planning to put 7 dwarfs living in a cave on screen in 2024. Disney, terrified of appearing insensitive to disability representation, issued a late-night statement. The new film would replace the dwarfs with magical creatures. That patch was meant to diffuse controversy, yet it somehow sparked a new one. Dwarf actors and disability advocates accused the studio of erasing one of the few high-profile showcases for performers with dwarfism and stripping away a chunk of the story's identity. But rewind once more, because the dwarf question really sits at the heart of how a feel-good diversity headline can turn into a communications nightmare. When Dinklage's comments blew up, Disney's crisis response unit held midnight Zooms with representatives from Little People of America, trying to decide whether hiring dwarf actors would be progressive, exploitative, both, or neither. Several performers, including Game of Thrones alum Dylan Postal, publicly pleaded, "Please don't cancel roles we rely on." Disney found itself arguing 2 contradictory positions at once. Dwarfs are empowering icons when carved in marble outside the parks, but potentially offensive if they speak lines in 2025. The optics were brutal. You can sense the panic in the subsequent marketing rollout. Licensing partners received frantic emails ordering plush toy prototypes to be redesigned so they didn't look too dwarf-like. Meanwhile, the consumer products division had already printed princess gowns with the classic 7 dwarfs on the hang tag because that art was locked a year earlier. Retailers quietly shredded thousands of tags, while Twitter laughed that the mouse couldn't keep its own lore straight. Budget-wise, the numbers were eye-watering. Production costs climbed past $220 million after pandemic delays, but that figure didn't include the global promo blitz, a Super Bowl spot, Disney park stunt, influencer junkets, even an ABC musical special yanked at the 11th hour. Trade analysts pegged the all-in spend at roughly $300 million. For context, the studio could have funded Soul, Encanto, and half of Turning Red for the same price. And Pixar's originals rarely generate death threat hashtags. The fiasco also shone a harsh light on Bob Iger's return as CEO. Iger inherited the remake and, according to one Hollywood Reporter piece, considered pushing the release to Disney Plus to limit downside. Theatrical bookings were already contractually guaranteed, though, and writing down an asset that large would have rattled Wall Street. Some insiders pointed to The Little Mermaid, which overcame online skepticism to top $560 million worldwide, as proof Disney should stay the course. Others warned that mermaid nostalgia is not quite the same as rewriting the template for every Disney princess. If nothing else, Snow White 2024 illustrates how the culture war now weaves through every step of the filmmaking pipeline. Casting, script tweaks, costume choices, even activist hashtags all get weaponized in seconds. The angry YouTuber economy generates millions of views by spotlighting perceived slights, while studio PR teams still operate on a 24-hour news cycle. That mismatch is lethal. By the time Disney drafted a 5-point message stressing inclusivity, legacy, and joy, the counter-narrative was already on lap 3. Older fans, meanwhile, felt doubly burned. Many grew up collecting VHS clamshells and buying princess dresses for their kids, then watched press junkets where the star called the story that shaped their childhood outdated. The result felt less like an invitation to evolve and more like an accusation. Nostalgia flipped to defensiveness overnight, a reminder that brand equity can vanish faster than a magic mirror's fog. Still, none of that compared to the firestorm ignited by a single tweet. In March 2023, weeks after she'd been coached to keep the focus on family-friendly talking points, Zegler retweeted a blunt, "Free Palestine" message. Depending on your politics, it was brave, tone-deaf, or both, but from a PR standpoint, it was a lit match in a fireworks factory. Screenshots flew, conservative pundits pounced, and rumors spread that Disney had dispatched executives to beg Zegler to delete the post. Rumors she fueled by refusing. Suddenly, the actress was the story, not the movie. By the time the first teaser dropped, Crazy Boycott Snow White was trending. Reaction channels cranked out daily rants about girl boss Snowwoke. One viral TikTok stitched Ziegler's comment about residual pay, "I deserve to be paid for every hour this streams," with clips of empty grocery store shelves and gas pump prices, framing her as a pampered Hollywood princess lecturing working families. No matter what she said next, the algorithm had already appointed her the villain. Disney's marketing machine seemed frozen in headlights. Teasers landed with a thud, revealing computer-generated magical creatures that resembled stunt doubles from a mid-2000s video game. Test screening leaks on Reddit labeled the tone confused, new musical numbers pointless, and the deleted classic song sacrilege. Instead of reshoots or a date shuffle, the studio forged ahead, perhaps convinced brand loyalty would override online noise. Internally, reports would later claim that executives couldn't agree on any single course correction, so everyone settled for inertia. Opening weekend arrived like a slow-motion train wreck. A family film needs families, and families didn't show. TikTokers filmed themselves walking into matinees, panning their phones across rows of empty seats with sad trombone soundtracks. Box office trackers clocked a disastrous $29 million domestic debut, less than Dumbo and Mulan, both already branded flops. Overseas numbers were bleaker. A Letterboxd jokester wrote, "This is the only Snow White where the movie falls asleep first." Then came the IMDb freefall, a 1.6 average rating, hammered by tens of thousands of one-star reviews. Review bombing? Certainly, but perception is reality in Hollywood accounting, and perception now screamed flop in 50-foot neon letters. Stock analyst headlines projected a loss between $200 and $400 million once marketing spend was baked in. Rival studios roasted Disney in private WhatsApp groups. YouTubers carved the carcass like Thanksgiving dinner. Just when you thought the meme cycle had peaked, an AI-generated OnlyFans scam using Ziegler's face exploded on social media. It was obviously fake, pixelation, uncanny valley smiles, yet it racked up 40 million views in a day. The speed at which people believed it spoke volumes. Ziegler's image had drifted so far from wholesome Disney heroine that a porn-bait click farm seemed plausible. She responded with a weary post about online safety, but the clip already had a life of its own, and that brings us back to Springfield. In the cold open of the Simpsons episode Snowwoke, a smug princess bans princes, lectures villagers on patriarchy, and watches her premiere tank while Ralph Wiggum munches popcorn. It lasts less than a minute, yet it crystallizes a year's worth of headlines into one brutal joke. Once America's longest-running sitcom roasts you during Sweeps Week, the saga is no longer niche internet drama, it's pop culture canon. Where does that leave Rachel Zegler? Hollywood abhors a vacuum, and the town quickly moved on, cast casting notices that once highlighted star of Spielberg's West Side Story and Disney's Snow White quietly scrubbed her name. A streaming series she'd circled is rumored to have changed leads. Industry trades whisper about brand risk and media training boot camps. Even Spielberg, who famously champions his protégés, has shifted public praise to other rising talents. The Cinderella transformation became a pumpkin in record time. Some observers argue the backlash says more about fandom gatekeeping than about Zegler herself. They note that Disney practically invited a lightning strike by announcing drastic changes to iconic elements, dwarfs, songs, love story, without laying narrative groundwork. They point out that male actors spout controversial opinions all the time without tanking their films, suggesting a double standard. There's truth in that, yet it's also true that neither Disney nor Zegler seemed ready for the ferocity of modern internet blowback. What can studios learn from this implosion? Lesson 1. Nostalgia is fragile. Tinker with a classic, and you inherit its emotional baggage, good and bad. Lesson 2. The internet doesn't separate art from artist. The lead's off-screen persona becomes the real trailer. Lesson 3. If your VFX creatures look like a PlayStation 2 cutscene, do not feature them on the teaser poster. And what about Zegler's next chapter? Hollywood loves a comeback. Robert Downey Jr. rebounded from mugshots to Iron Man. Kristen Stewart cruised from Twilight memes to Cannes darling. The roadmap is clear. Retreat, recalibrate, and return in a role that plays to your strengths. Ideally, an indie drama where the performance eclipses the PR baggage. A sit-down apology tour is optional, but a social media reset is mandatory. The good news, she still has that voice. The better news, audiences have short memories. Disney, for its part, will do what Disney always does, double down on safer IP for now, then quietly test new ideas once the smoke clears. Somewhere in Burbank, a whiteboard already lists legacy sequels that won't anger the base. The suits will blame marketing will blame audience fatigue, and the cycle will spin until the next remake hits the same buzzsaw. Unless someone finally decides originality is cheaper than damage control. So where do you stand? Was Snow White doomed by social media missteps, by corporate indecision, or by a fandom allergic to change? Drop your take in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, share it with the movie lover in your life, and subscribe for weekly breakdowns of the stories behind the headlines. And remember, even in Hollywood, fairy tales come with fine print clauses. See you in the next video.